Hi everyone, welcome to the Journal Café. My name is Esperanza Lopez and I will be presenting Migration Efficiency Sustains Connectivity Across Agroecological Networks Supporting Sandhill Crane Migration. This study is conducted by Patrick Donnelly et al. In 2021. I hope you enjoyed it. It's pretty long. Here in the slide you see an image of the Sunless Valley where thousands upon thousands of birds congregate at the stopover site on their way to the breeding grounds up north. Water birds migrate hundreds to thousands of kilometers between breeding and wintering locations to find favorable food and weather conditions, and therefore depend on networks of stopover sites, usually wetlands, to stop, rest, and refuel. Now, without these stopover sites for resting and refueling, the water birds, in this case the sandhill cranes, would be too exhausted, the migration would be too costly, and it may even cause death and starvation, or starvation and death, exhaustion. So these are essential in their migratory journey. These stopover sites are occupied for a short period of the annual avian cycle, such as migration, breeding, and wintering. The stopovers are crucial for survival and fitness. However, 91% of migratory bird species lack adequate protected stopover sites because of the changing climate and just the natural resource consumption by humans. So as urbanization occurs, an example would be Las Vegas. As Las Vegas keeps growing, water gets diverted to these growing cities and is no longer available in a natural setting for these migratory birds. Another example would be climate changing, where water was once abundant, now it's dried and evaporated, so sandhill cranes have to find a different stopover site where water is available on their long journey. Not just sandhill cranes, but migrating birds in the same path, same route. In this slide, we see that arid and semi-arid mid-latitudes of Western North America are among the most important inland water bird flyways and are structured around distinct wetland basins and riparian drainages that feed lakes and wetlands. These aquatic habitats support millions of individual birds during migration, breeding, and wintering, including 94 migratory water birds, and of course, including the sandhill crane. So all the water systems of rivers feed into these lakes and wetlands that support the stopover sites for 94 migratory water birds. But because of urbanization and climate change, those naturally occurring wetlands are not available, and in this case are no longer protected or aren't protected. And so this study is to present the evidence so that we can encourage those who have the means to protect these stopover sites. All right, 2/3 of wetlands are associated with agriculture, such as flooded, irrigated, riparian wet meadows that migratory birds depend on. So in a normal setting, this is an image of a healthy meadow. This is where they would be stopping on their way to breeding grounds or on their way south to their summering grounds. But they're no longer available as, again, climate change and urbanization. So preserving these wetland stopover sites continues to be challenging because it is difficult to quantify the biological dynamics in them. So this is why the study was conducted, so that we can quantify the value of these dynamic wetland habitats for used as stopover sites for the sandhill crane. All right, in this slide, we have a map of all the different sandhill crane populations. There are some populations in the East Coast, populations in the Great Lakes, the prairies, the Rocky Mountains, the Sunless Valley, the Central Valley in California, and then in Alaska. But for this particular study, the team GPS tagged 108 individuals from the Western North American population and recorded their observations from spring 2014 to spring 2020, a 6-year study. So this study is an attempt to quantify their stopover and identify which of them are valuable enough to preserve, conserve, and negotiate how we can help these waterbird stopover sites that are disappearing due to climate change and urbanization. All right, the data collected from the 6-year study used first passage time analysis as the metric to measure movements and space used during summering, migration, stopover, wintering. So in this graphic, the red represents where they spend time summering, the gray is migration, stopover is 48 hours along those two routes, and the blue represents the wintering. So clearly they are up north in the summer, down south in the winter, and migrating everywhere in between and stopping over everywhere in between. So in order for them to identify, okay, where are they spending their time, they categorize summering as segments where they prolong localized movement. The prolonged localized movement was during early spring. Wintering was categorized as prolonged localized movements beginning in late fall, and migration, everything in between. Stopover segments were 48 hours during that migration. So we know that they are up north in the summer because the tracking devices track them there in the spring, and we know that they spend time in the south because the tracking devices track them down there during the winter. All right, in this graphic, which I think is very fascinating because it shows the cycles of migration for the 6 years, and it's pretty interesting. So here you have 3 populations of the Western United States or North America, and these populations, or these 108 cranes that were GPS, you can tell where they've been flying, and some of them are pretty adventurous. For example, in the Rocky Mountain population, which is the blue, you have these cranes that go as far down as central Chihuahua, going all the way to Wyoming, and then some of them even traverse across Arizona, mixing with the population in the lower Colorado Valley, and then meeting up in Idaho. And then you have the same thing with the lower Colorado River Valley population, traversing in their normal route, but sometimes crossing over to the Rocky Mountains. So these are adventurous, brave sandhill cranes, probably very experienced, and or probably following a mate. You know, the males follow the mates and the females follow the food. So let's see. I think it's interesting just to see the movements and the stories they may tell. All right, in this graphic, we see that the cost of migration, which is the distance traveled, is Donnelly et al. They used a measure called betweenness to quantify how much time they spend in each of those locations, and have a quantity given to that location. So they use this quantity called betweenness, and this betweenness is a result of a formula where they plug in all these variables, how much time they spend, the distance, and so on, and they get a percentage. And so this betweenness, the greatest betweenness or percentage of betweenness, which means what they spend most time between the migration cycles, north and south, and the larger the diameter of the betweenness circle is the most times they spent there. So the larger the circle, the more time they spent there. Therefore, those larger circles represent the stopover sites that are highly essential for their journey north or journey south, and so are the subject for negotiating conservation efforts because they are clearly dependent on these places as they spent most of the time there. Overall, the results of the data showed betweenness to be significantly more important to network evaluation and is therefore the metric used to assess flyway connectivity. And so using this betweenness, the study results showed 71 unique stopover locations used to construct spring, fall, migratory network connecting birds to summering and wintering grounds. So all these tiny little stopovers, some highly important, three highly very important, and then others that are equally as important in that they are places where they stop, recover. And so that was really cool that they were able to identify these stopover sites. So many. All right, in this next graphic, we are using the betweenness as a network centrality measure. Sandhill cranes use 3 key stopover sites essential in maintaining that flyway connectivity. So in order for them to maintain that north-south journey, these stopover sites were essential as they spent more time between the migration cycles. So there are 3. The blue one is indicating the San Luis Valley, Colorado, which was the image in the second slide at the beginning of the presentation, and Pahranagat Valley in Nevada, and then Lund, Nevada, in Lund in Nevada also. So all those, and it makes sense because those are the Lund and the Pahranagat Valley are the ones in that very dry area. So they need to stop over there. And I believe the Pahranagat Valley is a nature reserve for water birds, migrating water birds. These locations are also called ecotones, where ecosystems water balance transitions from semi-arid to arid, and they connect basically like the Mojave, Sonora, and then the Chihuahua Desert. All right, so those were the key stopover sites, highly important. These were also important as well, and these stopover sites identified as important in maintaining migration connectivity as well. So those 3 key areas, but these also as well as maintaining those networks for them to journey across to their breeding grounds and then down to the summering. So all of these areas are important. So how do we conserve these areas and those highly important areas now that we've identified their value? Stopover sites were associated with wetland or riparian habitats. The abundance of grain cultivation, barley, corn, oats, wheat were the most important landscape predictors of sandhill crane distribution within the stopover network. So if the meadows are gone, where are the sandhill cranes stopping? They're stopping in these agricultural wetlands that are caused by the flooding of these fields. So in this graphic also we see that sandhill cranes preferred, or the variable of importance, to stop over in areas where there was grain, where there was the distance of water, and then bare soil, shrubland area, and alfalfa. The rest not so much as importance. Public land, probably the nature preserves. I keep saying preserves. I'm wondering if I'm saying that incorrectly. All right, sandhill cranes were heavily reliant on private lands as evidenced by the importance of agriculture in predicting high bird concentrations within stopover sites, especially during the spring and the fall migration. So natural meadows gone, agriculture flooded with water and grains, heaven. All right, seasonal wetlands were monitored for use, 86% of overall seasonal spring migration and 23% in the fall migration. So most occurred in private lands. They spent most of their time in these wetlands, more so in the spring. So probably getting ready for that breeding season, right? Most occurred on private lands, which were flood-irrigated wet meadows. This is consistent with water rights dedicated to agriculture in the U.S. and Mexico. So as water is being diverted to these agricultural farms, it is no longer available naturally in natural meadows or wetlands. but now it's available in the areas where they have the water rights. They're diverting the water for their businesses, their agro businesses. Here in this graphic, the team observed patterns of continental movement indicating sandhill crane migration is dependent on distinct ecological patchwork of wetland riparian areas in water-limited landscape. So where there's limited water, they try to find where the water is forming this patchwork, and it is dependent on finding that water, and therefore they are making this patchwork of a journey looking for water and the grains. Therefore, when water is limited, sandhill cranes take advantage of agricultural food resources to offset seasonal changes to wetland availability caused by excessive evaporation and summer drying. So here the red circles indicate wetland decline, and the solid red circles identify decline as very significant. So the water has declined, so they are looking for patches to substitute for the decline in the water areas. The blue circles indicate stable to increasing wetland availability. So you can see that it's mostly in those northern breeding grounds, and then in some southern wintering grounds. Due to climate change and intensifying irrigation demands for agriculture use, wetland availability declined 16 to 18% across the network, stopover sites during spring and fall migration. So the water is declining in the stopover sites that sandhill crane and the other 90 plus species depend on for their migration. So what are they going to do? What are we going to do, right? So here in this graphic, it shows this water canal was flowing, and then here it shows a decrease in water flow. So in this case, increasing temperatures are predicted. In addition, temperatures are predicted to increase from 2020 to 2050, causing decreased snowpack runoff that supports these wetland functions. And so if drier temperatures are predicted, and already we are seeing a decline in the water availability, and as urban areas also continue to grow and more crops to support these growing cities is also diverting more water, what is going to be left for these migrating water birds? And if you can see this graphic, I think it's very alarming. So here you see wetland surface water starting from 1990, or actually 1988, I believe, to 2020, and it has significantly dropped. So the just a downward slope, very evident. So how do we sustain 3 of those key stopover sites essential in maintaining flyway connectivity? The highly valued betweenness, the Soundless Valley, the Pahranagat Valley, and the Lund and Lund, Nevada. So how, right? So sustainability of flyway connectivity will hinge on the balance of water allocations that preserve agriculture and wetland riparian function, conservation efforts providing long-term protection for agriculture land use, practices that sustain wetland habitats for all migrating birds. Okay, so if the water is being diverted from these natural meadows and we are predicted to have less snow, less runoff, less water, because it's going to be used more for agriculture to sustain the cities that are growing and more water to the cities. So how do we then sustain these connectivity stopover sites that require water, right? All right, here's an example. So in conclusion, thanks to the Donnelly et al. Study, attention is now focusing on the stopover sites and how do we conserve them. So one thing that I thought was really cool was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, through the Cooperation Agricultural Program, is seeking one agricultural operator, basically a farmer, to conduct farming operations on Units 13, 22, 23, and Parma Farm on Monte Vista National Wildlife Refuge. During this period, the farmer, I thought this was really cool, the farmer is to farm approximately 370 acres to produce and harvest alfalfa and 140 acres to grow barley to leave standing and unharvested to support the sandhill crane population during their spring migration. So thanks to this study that quantified and gave value to the stopover sites, we are now realizing that even though we are growing as a population and the demand for urbanization and the demand for agriculture is great and water is being diverted and climate change, that we can still work with what we've got to preserve what we've got. And in the Native American culture, we're all brothers and sisters, all creatures that God made. And so why not advocate for our brothers, the sandhill crane, or all the other wonderful water birds that need us in their long migration, because we are clearly stealing the water from these natural settings to grow ourselves. So why not give back? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the study. I did, and I really learned a lot about sandhill cranes, but mostly I learned how important agricultural wetlands are, and how even though it seems that agriculture is massive, massive production of food, birds notice and animals notice, and so they will follow the food, right? The males will follow the food. Pardon me, the females will follow the food, and the males will follow the female. So, God bless. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you at the end of class. Ciao. Here are the references. Take two. Goodbye.